Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, as Al-Qaeda-linked militants claim responsibility for an attack that killed 20 in Mali, France's defense minister calls on the Pentagon to keep US troops in the fight against terrorism in West Africa. Also, Burkina Faso has seen a spike in the number of attacks from extremists over the years. We hear from some of the villagers forced out from their homes earlier this month in a raid in which 36 were killed. And Burundi's president, Pierre Nkurunziza, looks like he is set to step back after 3 turbulent terms. His party chooses another to stand in this year's elections, but there are concerns that doesn't mean Nkurunziza's done with exerting his political influence. But first, France is hoping that the US will not move forward with a possible withdrawal of troops from West Africa. France's defense minister was at the Pentagon on Monday and urged the US not to pull its assistance to counter-terrorism operations in the region.
Our friends in the Sahel are in a situation where our assistance is critical, and I have expressed the hope that both the United States and France will keep on supporting them.
Well, on Monday, an Al-Qaeda-linked group claimed responsibility for the killing of 20 security forces in an attack on Sokolo camp in central Mali. That happened on Sunday. Overall, extremists do seem to be stepping up attacks in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger across the Sahel. The US Defense Secretary has said, though, that no decisions have been made about whether to withdraw US troops from West Africa yet. Douglas Yates tells us more about how important the US is in peacekeeping in West Africa.
Well, its numbers are not large in the way the U.S. presence, say, in Iraq is large or Afghanistan, but they're critical. One of the areas that it's been very important are air bases in Niger, from which drones are launched. And these drones give amazing intelligence information, the ability to strike targets, as well as other kinds of air support for ground operations. There are also Green Berets who are training troops in Cameroon, in Nigeria, in the war against Boko Haram. So there's, about 300 in Cameroon, there's 100 in Nigeria. We're speaking of hundreds of troops, but they're critical trainers, or they're providing intelligence, they're providing drone services, and most of the countries in the region, without this support, would be hard set to fight these terrorists who are coming into the region.
So why would they want to pull out? And do you think that's likely?
I think what we have is a difference between the army brass, like Africa Corps, who are working to fight terror in the region, and the Trump administration on top. He has a very hard time selling this to his base. In 2017, when 4 U.S. soldiers were killed in Niger, he did not even know why they were there. It's not part of his strategy. And so there's been pressure from the White House to pull out, and they say it's in order to focus on more important wars with Russia and China. These 900 troops are not going to make any difference in those wars. So I think he has a hard political sell. And on the other hand, you have the Pentagon, you have Africa, the security people who work on Africa, and they understand this is the front line in the war against terror. They've been dedicated now for 8 years, and they realize if they pull out, if they leave Nigeria without backing to fight Boko Haram will flourish. If they leave France alone to fight Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb will flourish. And the terrorists are sensing this, and they're doing more and more attacks to try to undermine the morale of U.S. troops and make it politically infeasible. For Trump, Niger was like Benghazi, and he doesn't want to suffer that in an election year.
And why are we hearing France being really at the forefront of these calls for the U.S. to stay rather than African countries or African organizations? Yeah,
well, of course, it would be great if Nigeria could step up its presence and do more. But France is truly the only major power country besides the United States to be there. And one of the things that's decisive in the war against terror is air power. None of those regional countries have air power. What you need is the ability to strike from above small targeted operations. If you try to move a medium-sized battalion force to fight the terrorists, they dissipate. in the time that it takes to get that force there, they dissipate into either the surrounding countryside and the villages. So only with the kind of 24-hour surveillance of drones and with what that human intelligence on the ground informing them who's moving, what's being carried, can you strike an attack with efficiency. The drone wars in the Sahel are the new phase of the counter-terrorist war.
Douglas Yates there with me a little earlier on. Well, earlier this month, 2 villages in northern Burkina Faso were attacked by extremists. Dozens were killed and hundreds forced from their homes. Our correspondents went to the town to which many of the displaced fled. They sent us this report.
Leave or face certain death. These women walked for 5 days to flee their home. They had no choice, they say, and packed up the little they could after their village Nagraogo was attacked. The road was long. Fear and hunger didn't stop them. Now they've found safety in Kaya, they're searching for their husbands or any men that survived the attack.
My husband isn't dead. He fled to Kaya, but his 2 brothers were killed in the attack. 7 of my brothers were also killed. They're killing all the men. That's why the men fled. More than a dozen children have disappeared, and we're only just starting to find them. Maybe in town we'll see the others.
Once in Kaya, these internally displaced people head to the World Food Programme's distribution site. But to receive any aid, the displaced need to be registered at the local welfare office. At this stand for women with newborns, babies must be checked for malnutrition.
This child is in the green zone, which means he isn't malnourished. If he was in the yellow zone, it would mean he was malnourished. In the red zone means we have detected severe malnutrition. For this, we send the children to a health center.
Each person receives around 15 kilos of food. Grains, oil and rice have been distributed to nearly 4,000 people a day since the site opened.
These people need help. We had planned for an initial amount of food, but the demand is higher. We are asking all WFP donors to keep up their support so we can take care of new arrivals. The people here are in shock and we're trying to help them so they can get through this difficult time.
In 2019, more than 500,000 people were displaced in Burkina Faso, according to the United Nations.
Angolan billionaire Isabel dos Santos says that she'll sue the media organisations who published leaked files known as the LUANDA leaks that appear to show that her business empire is built on corruption. The daughter of the former longtime president of Angola has rejected the accusations of misappropriation of funds, and she says that the revelations are politically motivated. The Portuguese hacker Rui Pinto has taken responsibility for disclosing the 700,000 leaked documents. It looks like Burundi's president is truly prepared to stand down when his controversial third term comes to an end later this year. The ruling party's instead chosen an army general as its candidate for the upcoming vote. Incumbent leader Pierre Nkurunziza's last mandate triggered a violent national crisis. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
After several days of dancing and praying, President Pierre Nkurunziza kept his promise. On Sunday, the evangelical leader confirmed he would not be his party's candidate for a 4th term. The presidential election will be held on May the 20th.
We've held these meetings for 3 days in front of God. I want to thank the leaders of this party, those who organized these prayers. What we're about to decide, God has planned it.
The ruling party's candidate will be its Secretary General, Évariste Ndayishimiye. The 52-year-old politician was a former military leader of the movement. Like Nkurunziza, he's very religious, but he is Catholic.
After your decision, I was nearly afraid, but then I remembered that God told us not to be afraid, that He is with us. Today I see God's work here, and I say, I am God's servant, let His will be done.
Opposition members in exile told us they believe Ndayishimiye will follow closely in the footsteps of Nkurunziza. UN reports and NGOs accuse the government of having carried out human rights violations in recent years. They mention killings, cases of torture and attacks against journalists. Burundi firmly denies the allegations. When Nkurunziza announced his candidacy for a controversial third term in 2015, he sparked a serious crisis. Clashes left more than 1,000 people dead, and 400,000 Burundians fled to neighboring countries between 2015 and 2017.
The first sub-Saharan African designer whose collection is shown at Paris's Haute Couture Fashion Week has welcomed the spotlight, both personally and on behalf of African creative communities more widely. Cameroonian-born IMANE AYISSI says that it is important to him to tell African stories, both with his creations, which use truly traditional regional fabrics, and from his hard-earned platform amongst the fashion elite.
The Africans themselves must do what must be done. On my part, I do what I can to show real African fabrics, tell stories, do research and so on. And I think it's important to educate myself, and I think others should be re-educated too, make them discover what is maybe less well known about African fashion. For a long time, people have done a lot of work, a lot of good things, and with a lot of inspiration. Everyone is inspired by Africa. Everyone talks about Africa. Everyone loves Africa. But also sometimes everyone spits at Africa. And sometimes they want to do something on Africa. Sometimes it's done without Africans. Sometimes I think it's a shame.
And finally, Angelique KIDJO, arguably the continent's top diva, has been an example in gracious victory as she picked up a Grammy for Best World Music on Sunday night. The Beninese singer gave a shout-out to young creators from the continent as she picked up her fourth win at the event. She dedicated her Grammy to Burna Boy, the Nigerian singer who'd also been nominated in her category. So I'll leave you with one of the tracks from KIDJO's willing album, CELIA. That's it for Eye on Africa. Join us again if you can.
Tiene que saber que